Greg, you want to take it away and tell us what you do, why you're here? How can we help?
For sure. Thank you, first and foremost, for having us here. We are partners with the Jamf crew, and the reality is both myself and our VP of Sales, who's here, Patrick Cameron, wanted to come and, quite honestly, firsthand see and interact with customers. And what we found in the span of, quite just a few hours, you are our customers. You are faced with the same challenges, and as you'll see by the time I'm finished with the presentation, the sort of Jamf and JumpCloud story is very peanut butter and jelly-ish, and hopefully you guys will fabricate some great questions, which I'm assuming will come out. It's also great to see a number of folks that did come up to our booth are here to sort of go deeper and learn a bit more. And yeah, hopefully you get to see a bigger picture of what we and the crew in Boulder, Colorado, which is where we're based, have created over the last roughly 3.5 years in market. So with that, I'm good. I want to, again, say thank you for coming. My name is Greg Keller. I'm the Chief Product Officer at JumpCloud. So what I do is work with our engineering team and our product team and our customer success team in order to take what was a completely harebrained concept that we had as an organization and audaciously think about moving identity to the cloud. It's not as dangerous as you think. All of us came from different paths, enterprise software, but primarily security software. So coming together to bring our knowledge of cloud, but also algorithmic and encryption experts and those that know how to get stuff done in a secure mechanism. So with that, let me kick off. I already blabbed on about myself. Let's talk about what we will do. I'll get you in and out of here in a short amount of time, hopefully with levity and walking with some good knowledge nuggets on what directories have been. So the first is the evolution of directory services. Where did these things come from? We all came from a historic place of identity, and you'll understand very quickly what that legacy was and where it can go with products like JumpCloud. The second is Mac endpoint security challenges. You're here because Jamf does an amazing job at that, but we should at least briefly discuss the fact that Mac isn't as clean as everyone thinks in terms of securing that endpoint. And we all know Microsoft has its challenges being the Swiss cheese operating system to penetrate it, but in this case, Mac does have its challenges. We'll talk briefly about that. We'll then talk about our product, JumpCloud's Directory as a Service, why we built it, how we built it, and what its purpose is in life and the types of customers that are leveraging it every day. And finally, the exciting stuff, quite honestly, a discussion on the peanut butter and jelly, the Jamf and JumpCloud integration. There is overlap. Why do you use JumpCloud? When to use Jamf, and show you examples of how our real integrated and large customers are using us in Simpatico. And lastly, I'm not going to be able to do a demonstration today. We weren't able to get my machine on here, but many of you I see who have come to the booth know that I have a complete environment. I'm using a little MiFi to exacerbate how quickly we can do things over the internet with cloud-based services. So with that, let's start talking about the history that many of you are extremely intimate with. And let me preface. I have, in 23 years of building software, I have lived and built amazing Microsoft-centric solutions around the world. So this is not an example of anti-Microsoft. They're a first-class citizen to our company, just like Mac is, just like Linux is, from an endpoint management. But the thing I want to start to drive home is this, from a historical example. Microsoft was and is amazing at what they did when Windows Server 2000 was launched with its first real instantiation of domain control services. They had prior examples of that in the NT world, but really the user interfaces and this concept of group policy objects was born when Windows Server 2000 came out, and it was amazing, and still is amazing if you're a Microsoft-centric company, and that's a good thing. The problem is, as you'll see as we evolve, who really is anymore, right? So things were simple. I remember distinctly, I'd get issued, in the mid-90s to 2000, obviously, you'd come in, you'd have your workstation, like you'd have your cube, your workstation was below the desk, you'd have this big old fat monitor. Remember the degauss button? It's like, I never really knew what that would do. I think it's clear, That was the world we lived in and literally our world, our interface to a directory was Control, Alt, Delete. And that was it, right? The IT admin had all the other control capabilities to manage the domain, adding users, security groups, all that kind of stuff. And again, it was an environment that was predicated on immobility. Remember the desktop? You can't pick that thing up, right? So the Ethernet would go, serpentine its way somewhere to a server closet that was physically managed on premise. So again, I'm exacerbating, I'm really painting the picture of what we all lived. And Microsoft did a great job when things were that simple. But over the last decade, chaos, but good chaos, right? And I lay claim, this is my 4th startup, I lay claim to moving a lot of stuff to the cloud because it's where computing should be. But as you'll see, what created the complexities for a pristine domain control, or Microsoft's domain control? The first, on-premise itself became stressed. And really what that means is this. By the mid-2000s, 6, 7, and 8, think back, and probably around the time that Jamf itself was starting to inflect, what got introduced into the environment? MacBooks. Remember the big fat white ones? I remember our marketing guy brought one of these in. It was amazing. And you could see reflection in the white plastic, and it was this incredible device. But it was unmanaged. Like, he was privileged as the CMO to have this wonderful device, and we were all on our crappy, big fat Windows laptops, right? The only thing he could do was manage the machine and get onto the Wi-Fi network. Another introduction of on-premise complexity. Think about that. Everything that Microsoft was doing was tapped in through an Ethernet primarily. They eventually came out with radius-style services, but it was primitive, and the Wi-Fi was really hard to get connected from Windows endpoints. Mac, boom, that stuff lit right up, even on the earliest laptops. So that was, again, a stress on the local networking environment. And we can continue to add complexity there too. Things like the introduction of Macs, and of course, when the cloud started to really take off, and by that I mean companies building software, like their product, wasn't necessarily installed on a machine anymore. It was very likely being built on Linux infrastructure up in AWS as the #1 sort of cloud platform. You're seeing others like Rackspace Software, Google Compute Engine, and others, but AWS was it. They were the innovators of that. Again, on-premise stresses. The other thing, very similar story, infrastructure as a service. I mentioned AWS. There are no server rooms anymore. In 10 years, I haven't had a server room. We have down in the basement like a box with switches to hook up to like our T1 lines, but that's it, right? There is no like Windows box or blades anymore. That's all virtualized up in our case, AWS and GCE. But things like, being able to spin up a server instantaneously or ephemerally. I don't have to ask my IT guy to either add a blade instance or buy me a box. Like, you don't need to do that anymore. Parallels, virtual machines on your own machine or up in the cloud has changed everything. And of course, a kissing cousin to as I like to say, the AS's, Infrastructure as a Service, and SaaS, which is Software as a Service, that's the money shot. This is what changed the game. Here's a good example. Anyone here use Google Apps? Or no, G Suite? Right. So I remember distinctly when this came in, we were Microsoft Exchange users. And, I couldn't envision like not having my Outlook client, what's this cloud thing? And just think where all this has gone from there. I mean, everything. My CFO, there is no way he would ever have, I think we're using like Great Plains or some like huge big co Microsoft, like on-prem managed financial application system. It's like, no way I'm getting rid of this thing. Guess what? We're all up in the cloud now with various services. So, the software as a service has effectively changed so that the endpoint isn't the bottleneck, the choke point. You don't install software on, when's the last time you guys have installed, as a regular practice, a ton of software? Maybe antivirus, maybe Adobe Creative Suite, in certain circumstances. But the polarity has shifted. They need a browser, they need it to assert identity and get logged in. Things have changed, right? If I am smoking crack and you guys are in disagreement, raise your hand, because this is what we see every day. So as mentioned, we'll briefly talk about Mac endpoint security challenges. And very quickly, I'm comparing and contrasting Windows and Mac here. And it's very clear, I'm not here to draw competitive comparisons as much as Windows has just been assaulted for, well over a decade. It is a petri dish of viruses. And Mac, oh, no, it's based on Linux. No way I need an antivirus. BS. You actually do. And the proof is in the pudding. I mean, over the last, N number of years, Mac has been assaulted too. And, Jamf is here, among others, to help secure that endpoint from, through antivirus. Our company, as a security company, is highly restricted, our laptops with special antivirus stuff. And so we get it, and I know you guys are too. But beyond the myth of Mac security, really what I want to get into is this. It's when you think Active Directory, you think of endpoint or group policy objects, and Jamf does a great job at connecting those things to sort of the Mac endpoints. But the problems are this. Most sysadmins don't have the same visibility into Mac as they do or did with Active Directory. It's, they're blessed now to have things like Jamf. In other certain circumstances, Centrify, which is a very expensive solution that is predicated on having an Active Directory in-house, or now a combination of, using, as you'll see in a few minutes, the Jamf and JumpCloud story to manage that the totality of security across your Windows, Mac, and Linux infrastructure, which we can do as a combined effort between Jamf and JumpCloud. Again, I stress, as you'll see, Mac is incredibly important driver for us, but everything we do for Mac, we do for Windows and for Linux too. So now, let's talk a bit about the successes that we've had in the field. What is this Jamf and JumpCloud thing, right? Are there any non-customers of Jamf here? I'm just curious. I mean, clearly no one here is using, with the exception of a few, of JumpCloud. Great. So you are all hyper intimate with its operation, like now we have become as fans of Jamf and watching our customers interoperate. Let's talk about that. So the first is, it's sort of hard to see. I did these slides and I'm not a graphic artist, so I'm like, wow, 2 puzzle pieces. I even thought about the peanut butter and jelly thing. And effectively, I put the slide together to show the sort of the checklist, how our customers see us, right? So in the case of, you'll see some of our common customers at the end, but Jamf primarily used as the imaging and infrastructure and overall management solution. The very simple way to put JumpCloud, we're doing identity management at its core, managing the authentication, authorization, and then access to those systems, in addition to other employee resources like Google, like Office 365, like Wi-Fi, like all the other stuff. Where we started to go deep as it relates to system management is, quite frankly, in the world of, of course, the user stuff we do, as the genesis of JumpCloud, but multi-factor authentication has become huge for us. So any Mac endpoint that is now managed, you have your Google Authenticator or dual mobile app, use your password, and then use our token key and get in with an additional factor of authentication. So we're kind of taking our product in deep ways there, again, across platforms. So Mac is just one of them. I put this next slide together as sort of just to grok, how our customers are seeing us, and it's cloud-based. Who here is using the cloud-hosted version of JSS, right? And the on-prem version. Okay, so doesn't matter. The way JSS looks at JumpCloud, it thinks that JumpCloud is an LDAP server, this is something you need to understand. While we have this incredible architecture and it's sitting up in the cloud around the world, right, up in space, we've surrounded our product with protocols: Radius, LDAP, SAML, and a REST API, right? And the systems are managed with special agents. We'll talk about those in a minute. So literally, Jamf, which you can add an LDAP server and either use the manual or Active Directory versions, same thing basically, and it will go and consume through LDAP users and groups and all of that membership to be consumed but from an authoritative directory, JumpCloud, into now JSS. So that's like where our products kiss, so to speak, right? When you look at the totality of the architecture, Jamf and JumpCloud both can have agents. All of our customers that are using us, there's no agent conflict. There's nothing to worry about there. And we have the concept of once an employee's endpoint is delivered to the employee, the combination of Jamf with policy management and obviously imaging, and then JumpCloud with the user authentication and other elements like Wi-Fi authentication through Radius. So let's assume that your Mac endpoint is delivered to an office, right? And this office has a specific set of WAPs. And the most important thing as growing companies with good security postures is to what? Not share the SSID and password anymore, which I know you all have written up on the whiteboard in your conference room, right? The appropriate security posture is everyone uses their unique credentials to authenticate against the network, the same set of credentials they're managing with their machine, or to get into Google in our case, or Office 365. That's when you start thinking centralization. And now you see a deeper meshing between Jamf and JumpCloud. Any questions before I move on? Oh, in fact, I think you've been inspired to use the JNUC 2016 JumpCloud hashtag. So we will take those at the end, I forgot. So as mentioned, using JSS, and anyone after this, when you come downstairs and see us, I have the full environment set up if you want to see this in operation. I just took screenshots from my enviro. Is all done through LDAP, as mentioned. So you map your users, you map the groups, and if you have any, it's quite honestly, it's a 5-minute setup job. There's no deep, sophisticated stuff you need to know. I wrote the docs myself on this one because I was excited to get involved and learn about JSS. And we have on our knowledge base a complete set of docs to show you how the integration works. We use anyone here know LDAP? Raise your hand. So we use a bind-DN with obviously the password and your organizational key. That is the unique method to get you connected to your tenant inside of JumpCloud. Again, I'll show you that downstairs. This is the JumpCloud user interface. What I'm showing here very simply is systems. Let's talk about systems and then specifically multi-factor authentication. The agent. We wrote this thing in a language called Golang. It's Google's language. It's a variant of C. Super high performant, baked in security, and also multi-threaded and cross-compilable. So all the work we're doing, we can one-off. It can compile for Linux, it can compile for Mac, it can compile for Windows. So if you haven't, we're geeks on Golang, so study it. It's an amazing language. This said, each of the things in the screenshot, the machines that you see in red, those are offline machines. Maybe the user has shut down their laptop or I've turned off a VM. The ones in green are acting back. So you have a constant connection to know who's online, who's offline, et cetera. In the right-hand pane, that's sort of the details. What you're seeing here specifically, in order to enable MFA for any of your endpoints, that lower right-hand checkbox, click, and basically we handle the rest. The employee receives their email that says, you've been invited for MFA on this endpoint. And we will take great pains to know when that user has authenticated with their device, their mobile device, so that they can never be locked out of their machine. Because we've seen other implementations of MFA on endpoints that forget to tell their users to put a key generator on their phone so they're locked out. We've taken pains to prevent that. What it looks like is this. And downstairs, this is my parallels box, which I will show you when we're downstairs. And effectively, that second factor screen below, the top one is your JumpCloud password. The bottom is the MFA token key that we added in to the login screen. So JumpCloud can control that whole screen and that experience. Incidentally, we do all of the keychain updating as well. So when your password changes, we'll ripple that through keychain too. So in this is from a user management perspective. The product is incredibly scalable. You simply enable and activate an employee. Employees can completely self-manage, meaning if you have real IT people and you're all of those people, how many help desk tickets do you get a week that say, I'm locked out, can you reset my password? JumpCloud, you can certainly do that if you want to manage that process as an admin, or all of your employees can self-manage. They can reset their passwords from their phone, from virtually any endpoint. So that starts to strip away a lot of the overhead and nonsense that traditional AD or LDAP managers have had to do in the past. A quick snapshot. These are just, quite honestly, a very small sample of the common Jamf and JumpCloud customers. So we've got some marquee brands, as you see. I'm actually visiting Blue Apron and Business Insider, New York-based companies, actually the week of the 7th, just to health check them. And they are the ones, in fact, in the case of Blue Apron, helping us on a common Jamf and JumpCloud use case story, sort of a case study. There was a gentleman who had asked about how when an agent is baked into the imaging process of Jamf, how our connect key gets in there. And in fact, we already have the knowledge base article written. So if you're here and I can't see you, please come and see me. I have the knowledge base article for you. And the script, which they offered to us, the Blue Apron guys, which is really cool that you load into Jamf. And the other folks are doing almost the same cookie cutter process of managing identity and employee access to stuff with JumpCloud, and then the real endpoint management with the Jamf product. And I think all of these guys are using the cloud-based version, maybe Direct Line Group, maybe the on-prem version of Jamf. I told you all I would get you in and out of here in short time. So I want to say thank you. And I am here to go deep. This is my product, it's my baby, so I'm happy to talk to you about any questions you may have.
Got some good questions.
Sweet.
Are you ready?
Hit me.
Hit me. All right. So first one, what's the expired password experience like for end users? So I'm assuming you can set some sort of policy for length of password. What does that look like for an end user?
We call that our password complexity manager. So this part of the product it's part of the security area of the product, and what it does is enables you as an admin to model the complexity of your password as simple or as hard to meet at a minimum Windows complexity requirements and then PCI requirements. So add caps, special characters. But we do a couple of other things too. One is a rotation system, which is at what frequency do you want your employees to change their passwords? Every day, every 180 days, whatever. You can model that in the product too.
Please not every day. Please not every
seriously.
day.
And the last thing that we do is brute force lockout. So any of the endpoints governed or managed by JumpCloud, you can set how many break-in or login attempts should occur before we lock the endpoint. And then emails get distributed to the user of that system and the admin saying, this happened. And in the case of the user, it's a simple on the phone, I'm going to reset my password to re-authenticate and allow access again.
The next question is more about schema. So any interest or plans on allowing custom schema or new attributes for folks that want to customize their basically their LDAP integration?
Yep, it's happening right now. So in fact, we're working on an integration. This is a long-winded way of saying yes, but we're working on an integration with Workday, which is a human capital management piece of software, and they require some fairly robust custom schemas. That was a great excuse for us to actually implement the custom schema part of the product or feature that we're implementing. So it's happening. Engineering is going on right now for that.
Awesome. Next up is about compliance. This one specifically questions FedRAMP. Are you guys FedRAMP compliant? But what are the other compliancy things while we're on that on that subject?
Yep, awesome question. FedRAMP, no, but pursuing. We're currently SSAE 16 SOC 2 Type 1, moving into Type 2. And then we're knocking out PCI and HIPAA. They're just very elaborate, very expensive, painfully expensive processes to go through, but we've already got the SOC compliancy done.
All right. Next up is, I guess it'd be more of a competitive question in terms of other folks you see out there, but how does JumpCloud differ from some of the other SAML solutions like Okta and Ping and all those other type of things? Like where would I use this instead of those type of things?
Great question. The answer is it's sort of like apples and oranges. I'm using peanut butter and jelly, apples and oranges, a lot of weird analogies. They do what they do, we do what we do. And now let me get specific, not just rhetorical. We began life as an authoritative directory, right? Upon which we applied various protocols, one of them being SAML. We offer, 200 apps or so that we can assert identity to, Salesforce, Slack, all those guys. Okta, OneLogin, amazing companies, big companies, but predicated life on deferring to an authoritative directory, Active Directory in most cases. So the differences are this. OneLogin and Okta primarily own the customer experience as it relates to their identity assertion into web-based applications. And now, in some cases, some Radius, some LDAP. In our case, we do that, but we went wicked deep on the system management side. Really, how is identity managed effectively across a swath of operating systems? And that's where we spent our engineering time. Again, more authoritative directory-like as opposed to service layer-like. And that's the unadulterated view of the world. Companies that you saw on that slide use, in one case, Okta and us. We're like the AD to them. They can integrate directly through LDAP into us. And their employees just happily use Okta as their interface. But behind the scenes, humming in the background, is JumpCloud.
Awesome. Next up is kind of in relation to File Vault. Because encryption is really important on Macs. So how does the multi-factor authentication work when you're doing File Vault encryption on a Mac? So what is that experience like for an
Really
user?
Good question. Right now, nothing. And by intent. We needed to nail, this is a very serialized process to get this right. And so we needed to do the following as it relates to multi-factor. One, nail out, the first thing was keychain, making sure all that password propagation works right. That was mission critical. The corollary is then File Vault, critical, but in terms of the ability that we need to go through to password hashes into that belly of the infrastructure, it was way different than keychain. In fact, much more complex. So again, unadulterated way of saying it's in process. And any password changes in the early part of next year will propagate through keychain like it does now, and then update the File Vault encryption password. That's in process, or in engineering right now.
And this kind of ties to it as well, but one of the folks on Twitter mentioned kind of the post-system integrity protection world of what's basically in Mac OS and what kind of changes they allow you to do there. So I think with that question, I think we covered that for you. Let's see, next up, I think you kind of touched on this too, but I'll read off anyways. How does an SSO provider fit into an environment with JumpCloud? What kind of benefit does a directory service give you that SSO wouldn't?
Yeah, again, I'm trying not to repeat what I said before, but think of, you're a company that may even have an SSO provider right now, and your employees love it, and it's great. Yet you're faced with the challenges of the totality of all of the things that you must centralize that are connected to that employee. If you're using Okta, you don't get Mac management, right? Or Windows management, or Linux management, or a number of other resource endpoints. So look at the world, like we have this image that you'll see downstairs. It's like a circle with the identity in the middle and all these endpoints that are connected to that person. Okta and SSO will handle a great subset of them, but not the meaty part of the infrastructure, like machines or Radius, among other things, or LDAP.
Cool. Next up is kind of tie-ins with Oracle Identity Manager. Can JumpCloud retrieve password information from Oracle Identity Manager and pass it on to the client and force updates to keychain, those sorts of things?
Good question. No. For Active Directory, we do have a true domain controller agent if you choose to not have us be authoritative. We have a agent that'll work with AD to get you sort of connectivity to Mac or Linux or whatever. You obviously wouldn't use it for Windows. Oracle IDM, we do not. And I'll be very honest, I'm not going to pursue that. It's just not even a target market. If you're using, at that level, Oracle Identity Manager, you got a lot of on-prem stuff. And it's it's just not worth our target, which are, and I'll just kind of address this. Who do we sell to? Probably a blend of who you are out in the audience. Classic small to medium enterprise, few hundred employees to the low thousands of employees, both schools and commercial enterprises.
All right, next up, it's kind of the changes that we're seeing with Mac OS is less of the imaging and more of like a provisioning model where we're drop shipping devices to users. And the question came in, what does that look like, or is that supported with the multi-factor and some of the other things you're doing where I can drop ship devices instead of image them and send them out? Will that work as a solution for me?
We don't know yet, and we think we have a model for that. It comes down to this. We need to get our software, our agent, on that box in some way. It either happens during the imaging process or post-delivery. So it's just a function of how you choose to do that. Here's a good example, just to add some color. We had a customer who actually didn't use Jamf. They did do drop shipping, and they did have a antivirus software that was pre-installed on that image, whatever it was. And guess what? That's how they delivered the JumpCloud agent to the box. So there's a zillion ways, but like Jamf itself or like Cisco Meraki Endpoint Manager, we've got to get that agent on the box. So there's probably a number of different playbooks we need to continue to evaluate to get the software on there.
Next up would be, since you mentioned education, and we've got a fair number of education folks in their audience here, what does it look like to integrate to some of the things like Apple School Manager and some of those other things that kind of use LDAP services like we do as like the one-stop shop of where everything is? Kind of how does SIS and all that other stuff tie in with you guys as well?
Protocols. So let's create a fictitious school. You got PowerSchool, the Apple product, you've got Google Apps, right? Chromebooks and iMacs, right? So there's your school in a box, among many other things like Infinite Campus and all these other things. And what our product has done and what we've seen deployed in these schools is this. So JumpCloud gets introduced, right? Agent goes, they deploy to the iMacs, like in the school labs. The Chromebooks are nothing. Basically, it's their Google login, right? And all of that is mapped directly into JumpCloud. Everything else is done through LDAP. Remember, our product has an LDAP protocol. So PowerSchool and all these other things are just, they get mapped in through LDAP, as I showed you with the Jamf product, and that's it. And it's like this really quick implementation. Now, I'm trivializing some of the other things like education, meaning the education of the student populace and how they change passwords and all those kinds of things. That's the hardest part. The rest of this stuff is just clicking screens and integrating. Like the Google to JumpCloud integration as one example. Who here knows what GADS is? It's like an awful name. Google Apps Directory Sync. You don't need that anymore. We use OAuth and API to get ourselves integrated. So none of that server management. So it's fast in terms of how we integrate. It's cloud.
See, refreshing here. I don't see anything else coming through on Twitter. I guess I'll open it up. If you didn't get your question in Twitter, you want to raise your hand. Do you have anything out there for us? Looks like gentleman in the front here. Joni, you want to scream your question?
Talk to me, Jonah.
I'll redo it.
The app on the user's device, is that your app? Is it like Google Authenticator, or what app?
It's actually not even an app. It's the users. It's their browser.
Well,
So we have a responsive version of our website that'll do that. But typically, what gets received on the device is an email. And literally, like they tap like reset password. Chrome comes up with its response, or Safari comes up with its responsive version of the website. Enter in the username, password, they're done.
just to back up for a second, what was the question?
What's that?
Can we repeat the question
The question,
for
yes.
the recording?
For the recording was, what is on the device? Is there an app, or how else do they interact with it?
Cool. Let's see. I saw a few other hands. Yes, sir. Why don't you shout it? I'll repeat it for you, and we can answer it.
Is there integration with Duo Security for push notifications instead of using a PIN number to sign it?
Integration to Duo Security for pushes
For
and
pushes.
pins.
Not yet. Duo for mobile, yes, but we are working with Duo on a deeper integration. Right now, our sort of multi-factor integration relates to the TOTP standard, one-time password standard, which Duo supports, Google Authenticator supports, but Duo is pervasive through our customer base, and they want to see a deeper level of authentication and multi-factor with their product and ours. So that's part of my roadmap.
Other questions? I thought I saw one in the center. Yes, sir.
So to piggyback on the password expiration question,
Yep.
so say you're using JumpCloud for your identity provider for Google.
Yep.
If the password gets expired, how do they access their email on their mobile device when the password's been expired?
So great question. So they have
Greg?
a couple.
Question? What was the question?
Question is,
Sorry.
so as it relates to Google and password expiry, if we are controlling Google and the password expires, how do they solve the problem, right? So you have a couple of pathways. The most common pathway is to go to the end user's console through any browser, their phone, another person's machine, etc. In order to go to console.jumpcloud.com, they log in and they reset their password. Boom, all services restored, including Google. Then there are a few others, but that's the most common pathway.
So their password will at least authenticate them to the console to change the password and stuff?
Yeah, so think of our console as like the last man standing, right? So even if if the password expires, et cetera, we will have in that exact use case the ability to authenticate, get you in, and it effectively at that moment pushes out password hashes everywhere, brand new updated hashes.
Anything else? Yes, sir.
What's your, two questions. Where is your server infrastructure? And on the back of that, what is your availability and performance for places like Europe and Australia?
Great question. So let me repeat that. Where are we hosted, and what's our survivability and resilience plan, and what is our, repeat that last part about EMEA and...
So availability and performance.
Got it, okay. Availability and performance in different regions. So we split our infrastructure between Amazon Web Services and Google Compute Engine. We do this by intent, mainly so we are never beholden to any web service. In fact, our platform, which we fire drill, can be reinstantiated through our continuous CI/CD process in an hour. So literally, that's part of our audit process is to guarantee that level of resilience. So that's point one. Point two, in terms of the globality, we're in multiple regions around the globe. And the key there is to talk about the availability zones in each of the regions. So if any one of the AZs, if you're familiar with that terminology, is disrupted, we know how to redirect and get to the other AZs between cloud providers. So that's a very cool aspect of what we've done. Second part about, so knowing that we have regions globally, Asia, EMEA, and so on, and of course the United States, we have questions about, can we support data in those regions, especially for our European customers who at one time were following the safe harbor clauses, and we have a complete, model for that as well. Now that even safe harbor is gone, we can describe to you how we work with our customers in those regions to make sure the data and the rights of data and security of data in those non-US regions are sort of managed. And yeah, it's sort of a master class in how to deal with those regulations abroad.
I think we got one way up there.
So what happens if the internet's down? ISP goes down, something like that.
Yep.
Is there
Or you're on a plane.
Mac.
So great question.
My Mac's offline. What happens to me?
No
Yeah.
internet, no problem. Remember, the agent on the box has the last good hash of the password. Incidentally, and I didn't say this, but it should go without saying, we never see your clear text passwords, never. So everything is hashed and encrypted and transmitted through deep protocols. Back to your question, I will be on a plane today, and I'm too cheap to buy the Wi-Fi, plus I like a blackout period so my head doesn't explode from work, but I can still get into my machine to watch my local videos that I've installed for my bike racing stuff, because I'm a bike racing nerd. So how does that work? On my machine, laptop fires up, we're just hitting our module that's affronting the operating system's authentication module in Mac, and there's the last hash, I'm good, I'm in. So unadulterated way of showing you what we do behind the scenes. It's not like LDAP, where you need that persistent pipe, So that's the good news about having the agent on the box.
Good question came out of that is what versions of Mac OS do you support?
So 10 through Sierra Mac OS.
Awesome. And then do you guys have
Actually 10.9, although come back downstairs. I think we haven't sunset 10.9. I don't think, not yet.
Awesome. And then do you have any sort of SLA in terms of when Apple ships new software that you guys will come under compliance with that too? Because that's always a huge topic for our customers.
So good question. Do we have an SLA? No, but have we nailed both the Windows 10 and Sierra day of releases? Yes. That's always our goal. And I will say this out loud. The beta version that we were building off of when they released the gold version, hours before, yes, Apple changed things. So we round the clock it has to be regressed, put through QA, and like we did as normal, and they borked it. And guess what? They borked the authentication module. So shame on them, but we nailed it. Still got it out on day of.
I think we've got time for one, maybe two more questions. Anybody else all right, way up in the back there.
So a lot of the companies you showed using JumpCloud were somewhat newer organizations.
Yeah.
Older organizations with somewhat oppressive
Yeah.
how do you bridge to the future from the past?
Yeah.
Have you dealt with that, and what have you done?
It's a great question. We handle it every day.
Migration.
I'm going to repeat that. The question was the companies that I showed were sort of cloud forward, very young, sort of progressive companies that were never saddled with an older legacy directory infrastructure. That was very nice of me, right? And how do you help migrate or get them to the cloud? And we do this every day. First is this. We do have a competency in Active Directory migration. And we do so we have a special agent that can live on a domain controller or set of domain controllers, AD domain controllers. And you can have our products run in parallel for as long as you need, letting AD do its thing, letting it be the authoritative source. And we're just listening for those events, pulling over new user accounts, group management, anything that you need. And then when your infrastructure is prepared, you have agents installed on your MacBooks and Windows machines, you can sunset and do the transition. And we've done this successfully on a number of occasions. Quite honestly, there are companies that will never, they can't get rid of Active Directory, and that's great. We're not probably the solution for you, but for many, we are. And my customer success team has the playbook on how that transition happens.
And with that, I'm sorry, but we are done. Sorry, man.
I'm downstairs.
but-
Come and talk to me.
Come on down. We gotta get out of the room and let the other folks come in. But thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you,
Thank
Greg.
you.